Hello, friends. Today's chapter of the day is 2 Kings chapter 25, the last chapter of 2 Kings. And the story of 2 Kings chapter 25 is really the story of the end of the kingdom of Israel. And it gets set up by the second part of chapter 24. So we're going to start there. What we see in chapter 24 is Nebuchadnezzar is attacking Jerusalem. And eventually Jehoiachin, in the midst of famine and years of attacks, finally gives up and surrenders to Nebuchadnezzar and is taken prisoner. And in place of Jehoiachin, Jehoiachin's uncle, I believe is Matthias, whoever it is named king by Nebuchadnezzar. But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't just name him king, he actually renames him and makes him king. And that, as we see throughout Scripture, when you name somebody, it means that they are your possession. And Nebuchadnezzar made no bones about the fact that Zedekiah, his new name, was the possession of Nebuchadnezzar. And what we see at the end of 2 Kings chapter 24 is Zedekiah rebelling. He rebels against the authority of Nebuchadnezzar. And what chapter 25 starts with is Nebuchadnezzar saying, "That's it." And he comes in, kind of confusingly, but by the will of God, and wrecks Jerusalem. He destroys it. He drags Zedekiah out. He executes Zedekiah's sons in front of Zedekiah and then gouges out Zedekiah's eyes, so that the last thing Zedekiah sees is the death of his own sons. Then he takes Zedekiah to be prisoner and eventually executes him. After that, they just ransack, clean out, level Jerusalem. And it is very physically and very clearly the end of the kingdom of Israel. There's nothing left of that kingdom. And everything is hauled away. They leave some peasants and farmers where Jerusalem was. They put a governor, Babylon installs a governor to lead Jerusalem. Eventually the people of Jerusalem rebel against him because he's a traitor against the Jews. They see him as being a tool of the enemy. So they rebel against him and kill him. Things are not good. And really it's a very sad ending for the kingdom of Israel. But then we see in the last couple of verses this little glimmer of hope. And the little glimmer of hope is Jehoiachin, the king that surrendered and was taken away before this puppet king Zedekiah was put in. After 37 years in captivity, the successor to Nebuchadnezzar, Evil Murdoch or something his name is, frees Jehoiachin from being a prisoner and allows him to eat at the king's table. So essentially he gives Jehoiachin a place of honor at his table. So all of a sudden, after their country is destroyed, after the kingly line appears to be gone, there's this little bit of grace that we see for the people of Israel. And that's where we're left at the end of 2 Kings. So certainly isn't satisfying. It certainly is deserved after generations and generations of rebelling against the words of God. God finally lets them be destroyed, but he still leaves them with this glimmer of hope. And that's really what we can take out of this story. We happen to live in a country that's been rebelling against God for a long time. And we're starting to see the consequences for that. And those consequences at some point in the future, some think pretty soon, will intensify. But God has never abandoned us, and he never will. And we're always going to have that glimmer of hope, that God is always going to have his plan in place. It doesn't mean people won't suffer and die for the consequences of sin. But God's plan will always be in motion. And we can always trust in that. Because even now, in 2 Kings chapter 25, this dark time in what appears to be the lost kingdom of Israel, we're still proceeding toward the Messiah. Jesus is still on the way. And I bet you none of those folks could have believed that at that moment. But Jesus still came out of that kingdom of Israel, that kingdom of Judah specifically. So it's a reminder to have hope in the darkest of times. The times that these folks in Israel were dealing with are so much darker than anything we're facing now. But there was hope to be had there, whether we saw it or not. And our message is we need to keep our eyes on the hope that we see in Scripture through Jesus. So that's 2 Kings. It's been a ride to read, but lots to be learned from it and lots to be applied to our lives. And I'm hoping it was as informative to everyone else as it was for me. God bless.